I think more than anything, one of the things to think about is right, kind of the same way we did in one of the previous scripts where we thought before we just kept painting, right? We don't want to paint ourselves into a corner. So let's think about this for a minute. What is btn down's event handler going to look like? Well, it's going to look really similar to this. And what is stop going to look like? It's also going to look really similar to this. Also, what needs to happen after those 2 seconds? We need the button and the relay to be off. Well, is there any harm in telling an off button to be off? No. Is there any harm in telling an off relay to be off? No. So we could write one function to call in this timer.callAfter that simply has the job of telling everything to be off. It would be fine. All right, so let's do that. Let's write a function called func reset controls. It doesn't need any arguments. We're going to open and close it. And we're just going to tell everything, turn off. All 3 buttons, turn them off. Both relays, turn them off. Here's what I'm going to do it. Controls.btnup.boolean is going to be false. Controls.btnstop.boolean is going to be false. Controls.btndown.boolean is going to be false. Also, controls.relayUp.boolean is going to be false. And controls.relayDown.boolean is going to be false. Awesome. What do I do with this big ol' ugly function?
Oh, we're just gonna recall that function instead of that big ol' ugly argument that we just did, right?
That's exactly right, except for that there's that one little subtlety. The difference between the name of the variable and the function that it points at. We want to use the variable, not the function. All right, so here's how you do that. You start typing in func reset controls, and you make sure that you don't include the parentheses. If you don't include the parentheses, you're just taking the variable name, and the variable name points at the function. So now every time timer.callAfter runs, it knows run the function that this variable name is pointing at. That's what we want. Once again, if we actually included the parentheses, then what we would get is not a function, but rather the output of the function, which in our case is nothing. Our function doesn't return anything. What does a function return? That's coming real soon, okay? Our function doesn't make any returns, so it gets nothing. If your function returned a function, then it might work out fine, but ours doesn't return anything, so don't use the parentheses. And let's write the other 3 event handlers, and let's test our code. So copy, paste, paste. All right, we're going to change that to say btn down, and we're going to change that to say pin relay down. That fixes that one up. We're going to make this one be btn stop. And with btn stop, we are going to include the idea of making both relay up and down be true. So let's review our code for a second. btn up tells pin relay up to turn on. btn down tells pin relay down to turn on. btn stop tells both of them. Let's give that a shot. Let's see. Get into runtime so that we can see our code work. Hopefully, I'm feeling pretty good. Let's turn on the lights for those poor people. And I'm going to choose down first. Let's give that a shot. Hey, I feel good. There goes the shades. They just went down, and look at that. The room's getting dimmer, just like it would in the real world. Awesome. If I press up, hey, it's going up. That's awesome. And if I hit stop, yeah, good job. Did yours work?
I had a typo in mine. I mistyped the name of my function. In my defense, I named my function that turns everything off func naked grandma, because naked grandma turns everything off. And then I mistyped naked grandma later on.
Wow. So many
Unless
things.
your grandma is Helen Mirren, in which case I got to change this whole thing.
So many things that I want to say in response.
Also, make sure that you actually set your time knob to a value. If it's still set to 0, then that messed me up as well. Turn that up to 2 or something else, or else it's not going to work.
Good times. So that's working. You know what else we should do? What's the thing? That's the thing I'm always telling you to do, Nate.
You got to debug it.
We got to debug it. Let's write func debugger. And our func debugger, by the way, is also going to make use of our little text box, because that will be so nice. So we're going to come up here to the top. Let's write function func debugger. And one of the things that I want to run into func debugger is a string. So we're going to make argument string, arg string, and we're going to do 2 things with that argument. One is we're just going to print it, arg string. The other thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to stick it out there on that little text box. So what is that thing? It is on controls. It is text feedback. And, okay, so we talked about how toggles are typically Boolean, and we've talked about how faders are typically values. Nate, a text box is typically going to be what are we looking for?
It's a string, which is typically a string.
It is indeed. We're going to pass it arg string. We should use this function. And just to prove to you that timer.callAfter is a do later, come in after your call afters and call func debugger. And we're going to say for up, going up. Yay. And for btn down, after its timer.callAfter, we're going to make it say going down. And then for btn stop,
Go and stop.
going
Nailed it.
going nowhere. Just to be different. All right. All right. Boom. Going down. And indeed it is. And then going up. Awesome. And hit stop. Going nowhere. That's great. Except for, do you really like that the text is still there?
I mean, yours is at least still accurate. Yours says going nowhere, and it's still going nowhere. Mine says it's going up, and it's definitely not, even though it's been going up for 10 seconds now.
It would be nice if it didn't just keep this particular feedback. Easy way to fix that? You probably have already thought of it. All we really need to do is, well, right here in func reset controls, we can just call func debugger, and you know what string we're going to send into it? That one, an empty string. That actually is a string. It just has no characters. That's okay. All right, hit save, and now try things out, and look at it go. Okay, one last really nice idea that I want to add in right here is the idea of, well, if you play with this thing, you'll figure out that that if you just start button mashing, you can kind of get things a little wonky. Meaning, like if you press up and then immediately press down, it will stop. And if you press down and then immediately press up, it will also stop. And that's simply because of the way we've programmed this thing. It is purely just a matter of us poking the buttons too fast. One of the courtesies that we could provide for our user as a way of helping to curate a user experience is we actually could keep them from spamming the buttons. We could keep them from button mashing too quickly so that The motor doesn't get burnt out over time. Everything is just nice and easy and it flows real well. We can actually disable our controls.
Oh, I was going to say we should electrocute them. We should turn on the voltage to the touch panel so that it zaps them if they do it twice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's simply make the controls turn gray out, okay? Make them so that they're there, they're visible, but if you poke them, they just shrug at you and they don't do anything. That is called the isDisabled aspect on the control tree. And we are going to write a function, surprise, surprise, that's going to help us run that for us. So let's do it. Function, func, disable controls. We're going to pass in a Boolean argument. We're going to call it argBoolean because I opened it. I'm going to close it. And what are the controls that I want to disable? I want to disable controls.btn up.isDisabled. You find it right there on its control tree. And we're going to set it equal to, so if I pass in true, I want it to be assigned true. If I pass in false, I want it to be assigned false. So Nate, do I need a decision tree? Do I need control flow to make that happen?
Oh, you're going to use the argument?
Yeah. Yeah. We just assign the argument to it.
They both become Nate. Got it. I'm on it.
Gosh. It's amazing that he can make anything work at all. All right, controls.btn down.isDisabled is also going to be assigned the Boolean. Now, as you think about this, do we need to disable the stop button? Actually, the answer is no. Because if you were to disable the stop button, you would never be able to stop it. It would be so frustrating, okay? You always want the stop button to be operable. And when am I going to call these functions? Similarly to when we called funcDebugger. So func disable controls. And so when I press btn up, I want to pass in a true because I want to disable the up and down controls for those 2 seconds or whatever you have it configured to be. Similarly for btn down and similarly for btn stop. Now, we also need to, every time we clear that string and we reset the controls, we should turn the isDisabled back to false. Now, this is a word of advice. If you disable a control, it's disabled. It doesn't reset to being enabled with a power cycle. If you intentionally disabled a control, it stays that way until you intentionally turn it back on. So hit save. And now let's give that a shot. Run it down and notice how mine was disabled there momentarily. This is good. I think your end users will really appreciate that. So one last thing, especially insofar as I told you, make sure that your thing isn't broken. What should we do? We should make sure we start in a known good state. Let's just write a little function here. Func-init, and we'll put it right about here. Func function, func-init. All right, int. And what do we want to do? All it really needs to do is run func reset controls in this particular instance. That's fine. We're not going to overthink this. Func reset controls.
But still a good idea to make it a func-init because maybe later on you want more things to happen when it first boots up, right?
Yep.
Rather than just running disable controls now.
Yep, and then we're just going to put it in mainline and make it run at startup. And there you go. There you go. It all works. It's all good. And so think about it. What did you learn in this? You learned how to interface with QIO LVR4s, how to wire relays together. We had some big ideas of separating control surfaces from the actions that we need them to do on the other end. That made the feedback work out easier. And I'm sure we learned some other things along the way. But I think that's enough for the moment. And so let's take a little break, and we'll see you again real soon.